to CNCF2, but not to Hacktoberfest.
Oh, yeah. All right, I think we are live now. All right. Thank you so much for everyone for joining in for today's session on Hacktoberfest. We have an amazing panel of experts from the industry, ranging from students to also experienced folks with more than 5+ years of experience today, sharing all about open source. So we are going to be nerding about open source today, and the primary focus is going to be talking about the best practices when it comes to open source, because everyone knows that we recently started with the month of October, which is also known as the Hacktoberfest month, and this entire month is dedicated towards sort of promoting and helping big new contributors to get started with open source, which is officially hosted by DigitalOcean alongside a lot of different other partners like Intel, AppWrite. So make sure that you also do register on the Hacktoberfest website if you want to contribute. But of course, open source is not just about contributing during October or during Hacktoberfest itself. And that is why we have brought in an amazing panel of guests alongside us who will be sharing their own perspective and sharing some tips around open source, especially for new contributors, so that they don't fall into the wrong trap of contributing, and they can follow the right kind of guidelines and can set the right path while contributing to various open source projects. So I'll give a really warm welcome to Harsh, Oleg, Santosh, Vinit, and Ankit. And if it's perfectly fine, we can start off with the introductions. And of course, before we start off with the official session, feel free to also share your questions and answers, questions and queries in the comment section on the YouTube and the LinkedIn Live. We'll be taking up all those questions during the session itself, because we have the amazing panel to also answer all the questions that the folks who are tuning in live for the session will be asking. So we can start off with the introductions. So Ankit, would you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So yeah, firstly, thanks to Shiva for inviting me on this panel. Thanks to Scan, thanks to Skater, obviously, for hosting this. It's nice seeing so many familiar faces. I think I'm seeing Harsh after quite a while, so that's great. Really great to see all of you here. So just to start it off, I'm Ankit. I'm more known as QEDK on GitHub and Twitter. So just to tell you what I'm currently doing. Currently, I'm a blockchain engineer at Polygon. I just recently joined as a full-time employee, and I was like an intern for about 3 months. And currently, I'm also serving as the organization administrator for Wikimedia Foundation for both GSoC and Outreachy. So where I'm kind of responsible for bringing in new contributors, maintainers, and just keeping them involved and in the loop. I recently joined the Gitcoin rapid prototyping workstream, which is basically a DAO, where I'm also a part of the Moonshot Collective, where I'm basically building tools for public goods, which are basically all free and open source software where everyone can contribute, everyone can use for free. That's pretty much it from me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ankit. And I have had the opportunity to also work with a few open source initiatives with you at Mexili, which is also one of the other open source organizations that started out. So really great to see you contributing to a lot of different wide range of projects. And just a plug, Ankit is also a really avid Rust developer. So Ankit, if you want to also share about the Rust project that gained a lot of traction.
Oh yeah, sure. So like basically, if right now you want to use something in Rust, a lot of it kind of involves around static type checking. So which means that you need to get your types, or you need to have some sort of an experience. I just wanted to make that a bit easier for configuration. So I just built something called config parser, which is kind of tries to provide the same API as the original Python standard library implementation called config parser. And then I built a macro package on top of it called ini, which is basically just a shorthand way of using config parser to kind of automate or just make your life easy if you want to configure your libraries in a certain way. And that is around 150K, 200 downloads now. And it's growing. So yeah, I'm excited to work on that. And like, if you have not uh, like dove into Rust yet, it's a great ecosystem. And honestly saying, I love the syntax. I was telling this like to Shiva like a couple of days ago as well, who's recently started working with Quick.js. And what I have to say is, if you're still waiting for the time to start using Rust, perfect time. Get on it right away.
Absolutely. Rust is being used in quite a lot of places, especially in smart contracts, WASM, that is WebAssembly. So a lot of future for Rust, definitely. Then Harsh, would you want to go ahead next?
Sure. First of all, thanks Shiva for the invitation, and really great to see some of the most inspirational people from the community, like Ankit, Santosh sir, Vinit, and more of them. So my name is Harsh. Right now, I'm in my final year of undergraduate studies, and I'm working as a software developer at QuantSight Labs, working full time on open source projects like QHub, SkyPy, and more of that. Previously, I was a Google Summer of Code student at MetaCall. So for people who are not very familiar with MetaCall, then it provides a library for implementing cross-language function calls. So if you have a function written out in Python, you can call that in JavaScript or Rust or C++, whatever you feel like. I'm also currently working as a Google Season of Docs intern at Mojo Global. So Mojo Global is a community backed by the Linux Foundation, where we basically build measurement, reporting, and verification software for climate change action. And I'm also assisting some of the developers at the University of Southampton for their fast image processing library called libvips. So this is how I am associating myself with open source. And in the past, I have worked with Red Hat, QXF2, just to name a few. And my interests are majorly around web engineering, DevOps, and of course, the whole Python ecosystem. So that's pretty much about me.
Yeah. I mean, out of all the people I know in the community, like Harsh is definitely out there as one of the probably the best engineers that I know who works in Python. So thank you so much, Harsh, for joining in today. And
Thanks for inviting me.
yep. And then we have Oleg. Really excited to have you, Oleg, as well.
Yeah, happy to join too. So yeah, I started my open source journey in 2012, and yeah, currently I'm one of core maintainers of Jenkins. It's one of the leading open source automation servers widely used for CI/CD, build automation. I guess everyone on this call use Jenkins, whether you like it or not. And yeah, currently I'm a technical oversight committee chair in the Continuous Delivery Foundation, which pushes CI/CD unification and standards across the community. And yeah, I'm also a big fan of open hardware, and actually I have a PhD degree in hardware design. So if you're interested to know more about contributing to various kinds of the projects, I'm happy to talk. And yeah, I've been leading Hacktoberfest in Jenkins since 2016. So I will be happy to share a lot of insights.
Yeah, that's really great. And I mean, Jenkins is one of the largest projects when it comes to the ecosystem of the entire CI/CD pipelines. So it's really great to have you, Oleg. And I know today with everything sort of getting into a cloud-based space, CI/CD workflows are almost like have become an integral part of each and every company's workflows who are having some kind of an online presence. So Jenkins itself has seen a lot of rise, especially during the last couple of years, in being used as one of the leading CI/CD tools. So yeah, thank you so much for joining in. Then we have the amazing Santosh. Do you want to just give a very quick introduction?
Hey everyone, yeah, Shiva, thanks for invitation. So my name is Santosh, and I'm one of the Google developer expert for Angular from India and GitHub Star, as well as I'm part of Auth0 Ambassador program. And I'm mostly involved in Angular community. That's how actually I came into open source world. So I started contributing to Angular and other projects. Then I started creating few libraries, maintaining them, and yeah, that's about me. And I work as a software consultant, so I don't get that much time to actually contribute to open source, which I actually really miss. But yeah, I'm doing other stuffs like live streams and other things. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then we have Vinit.
Hey CI, thanks for inviting me, and like I'm glad that I'm again associating with Scalar. So I have already worked with Scalar in past. So and again I got an opportunity to talk with the Scalar community. So myself, Vinny, I work as a senior software engineer at Postman. So basically, like my major role at Postman is to deal with the ecosystem layer of APIs. So the as you most of you must be knowing that Postman is API dev platform. So I'm really glad that Oleg is here, and I actually build integrations for Postman. So be it a CI/CD gateways or maybe APM. So If you have been following us on Twitter, you might have checked out our latest release, that is V9 release, where we have actually shipped out integrations from most of the these four sectors, so gateways, version control, CI/CD. And glad that we super soon we'll also have Jenkins that's lined up. And if you have any tools in your mind and you love some tools or any third party services that you want to integrate with Postman, I'd be happy to know about that. And you can raise an issue feature request on our GitHub, and we'll take it forward from there. So thanks. And that's about my work. And other than, I'm not very active on open source, but I'm fortunate to be, a fellow GitHub star with Santosh from India. And other than that, I'm part of GSoC. I do GSoC with Postman as well as a sync API. So again, a sync API is something that we are promoting, the event-driven architecture, and the way OpenAPI has done for REST APIs. The same thing we are doing for async APIs. So we do GSoC there, and a lot of good projects which is lined up there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much about me. Thank you, Siva.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's really great to see each one of you sharing about your experiences. Again, tons of experience that we have from a wide range of different type of communities from blockchain. So if anyone of the folks who might be interested in web dev, CI/CD, blockchain can definitely also ask your questions in the live chat. So coming to probably the main agenda of this particular panel discussion, and talking about what are some of the best practices while contributing to open source. So if we can probably start off with a very quick understanding of for all of you, what you understand or what open source means for you, and what are some of the best practices when it comes to open source. So we can probably start off with Ankit, and we can sort of have a round of discussion regarding this topic of what are some of the best practices for open source.
All right, sure. I'll start this off gladly. So like talking about Wikimedia Foundation, right? So the interesting thing is that like probably we do our things a lot differently than people in open source might be used to. So it means that we also kind of have a certain level of expertise required before we can start contributing, because our projects don't live on GitHub, right? Our projects live on Gerrit, which is like our self-hosted instance of a let's just say that it's not as advanced as GitHub, but it's all internal. And the reason we do it is so basically we control the entire process end to end, since we place a lot of focus in using open source hardware and open source software. So like everything we do is basically all internal tooling and infrastructure that we own. So just to talk about practices with respect to how you would get in touch with the community, or how you would understand um, how the code base works, right? I think one of the most important things is being actively engaging with whoever the maintainer is. So I think a lot of mistakes that like which I made when I was first starting off. So like I think my first open source contribution was back in 2011, 2012, when it was basically like a JavaScript tool to kind of help edit Wikipedia. And so then like I was just learning JavaScript, didn't really know how it works, which meant that obviously I wasn't putting out the most optimal work out there. Like all they're interested in helping, a lot of the work is kind of figuring out how the code base works or how exactly things are meant to be done. So like for example, like right now most popular repos are probably going to be using some kind of linter, maybe like ESLint, maybe it's going to use standard, maybe it's going to use prettier. So it's kind of quite important to know what the repo is using. And if you're working off a branch, just be aware of whatever tests are being run, whatever linters are being run. Like it's good that you're interested in committing, like interest comes first, definitely. But I feel like when any newcomers are joining a community, they kind of fail to take the first steps, which would be engaging with the community actually, and engaging with whoever the maintainers are, and just kind of putting in a bit more effort into understanding the code base before actually making those commits. I think that's pretty much it from me as a starting point. Let's see what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, also, if, like, we can also look at if someone might want to join as a newcomer, what could be the step-by-step process for them to also, get started. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the best practices, of course. So, Harsh, do you want to go next?
Sure. So if we see a lot of times that the new contributors that are coming up, they start off with a general introduction that, hi, I'm coming from this particular college or university. They're particularly coming from a college background. I know these tools and technologies, which the project might not be using, and they just ask for some sort of a guidance or a mentorship to get started up. In my opinion, that is a pretty wrong way in getting started, because most of the time you are actually expecting the people to spoon feed you. And open source is all about helping out the new people, helping you get started, but no one exactly has the bandwidth to spoon feed you during the entire process. So instead of just introducing yourself or reaching out to people, have a dig with the project and just go and study the code base. If we take a large project, like let's say SkyPy, there are plenty of resources on SkyPy. There are specific tutorials, there are specific talks, there are specific blogs, resources, podcasts. You can go through each one of them and you can try to have a basic intuition on how the project works. The next step can be to actually pick up a particular feature or a particular bug and just have a thought process around the same. You don't exactly need to give out a perfect solution for it. So when I started contributing to SkyPy, one of the first issues was around compiler caching. So we wanted to make the CI builds faster, and this is why we were looking towards compiler caching part. So instead of just digging around with the same, we started looking for alternatives to achieve this particular part. And this is how within a week itself, we arrived at a particular solution. So just have a dig around with the available resources, because I guess I saw a tweet by Naval today that if you're building on open source, you just have to solve a particular problem once. So whatever work you do on open source, it will be acting as a reference for a lot of people out there, for a lot of projects. So just leverage that, just try to find out the references and have a dig around it. Even if you're not very confident of putting it out on the code, just document that particular solution. So maybe just create a message, send it out to one of the maintainers, obviously on a group chat, not on a DM, and ask for specific feedback. And they would be the people who would be more than happy to have you contribute through those parts. So as an beginner contributor, just make sure that you're putting out the best, your best forward, so that the other people can help you out as well during the whole process. So just have a clear mindset on what you wish to achieve, what is your particular inclination of working with that community, and what exact impact do you wish to create in the long run, and everything else would be pretty much simple.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with the fact that a lot of times we have this expectation that we are joining a community, and people hear that, okay, the community members are there to help you out. But yes, at the same time, we shouldn't let that expectation lead to the fact that we are expecting them to just do the entire code for us, or just do that entire process for us. The main aim should be that, okay, you are able to understand what exactly is the thing that you're supposed to be doing, all the relevant resources to help you set up the local project on your system, and then being able to follow the steps that are required to solve that particular issue. It could be a documentation issue, it could be bug or a new feature request. Definitely, I completely agree with you. Oleg, would also love to know about your experience, because you have been a org admin. You have also been a mentor for a lot of different projects, especially during for students as well and for professionals as well. So we'd love to know your take on it.
Yeah, so first of all, open source is a quite a diverse ecosystem. So what it means, there is a huge number of projects, and these projects differ in terms of not only technology stacks, but also they differ in terms of culture, they differ in terms of organization. And for you, if you want to join a community, it's like finding a company. You need to find a good fit. So if you want to join a project, the first thing would be to find a project you like. And for that, events like Hacktoberfest are a great opportunity, because there are many participating communities and you can study them. So if you consider just starting your open source journey Hacktoberfest, my recommendation would be to try different projects that are interesting to you. And then once you find a community you like, then you can start expanding, studying deeper, and basically participating in communities' day-to-day life. And then you can also decide what you do there. Because in open source, it's not just writing code. There are so many various types of contributions you can do: writing code, test automation, design, just speaking and spreading the word. Basically anything you can any activity can help the community. And depending on your interests, depending on what you want to learn or what you want to share, you can define your next steps. But for me, if you start, the most important thing is to find a community that you actually like. And if you want, I can talk about it later.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much for also sharing about some of the things that people also have a misconception with this. That yes, open source contributions are not just limited to the code. There are a lot of different non-code contributions that you can make with respect to community work, making blogs, or writing documentation. So yeah, thank you so much for also shedding light on that fact.
Yeah, and it was mentioning that for Hacktoberfest particularly, you also don't have to write only code, because the passing criteria is the number of pull requests, but many communities currently use documentation as code, so you can create documentation, you can write designs, artwork, some communities, of course, automate blog posts, even Twitter can be automated via pull requests, so if you want to contribute, it doesn't have to be code even during this month.
Then, Santosh, would you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of points which was already mentioned. So, I mean, open source is just not about code. So a lot of people think, okay, I should actually contribute to some large projects like React or some Angular, but that's not the case, right? I mean, if you think, just take for example, right? Is React sufficient to actually build an entire application, or even Angular is sufficient to build the entire application? It is not. There are a lot of libraries which makes the ecosystem. So don't go for the bigger libraries, right? There are a lot of projects which you are already using in your project. Try to pick one of them which probably you are using and which is like good for you, and your organization is actually it is helping your project and your organization. So try to actually get involved in that project. That's how you learn, right? I mean, okay, this is how it is implemented, and you can also help someone else grow, right? That project which is not probably not getting sufficient stars or sufficient focus from the community, you can help them, right? So those are the things which you should keep in mind before you actually go ahead and contribute to some open source project. And I would also like to mention the larger community which is actually not getting involved in the community into the open source, which is working professionals. Because if I see today, a lot of students are actually taking the initiative, right? Getting into open source world and doing the all open source. I have seen many students actually, they're part of Webpack, ESLint, and I'm surprised, right? I mean, because there is a large community or large number of developers who are already working, they know everything, but they are not, probably they are not making time, or they don't get time. I'm not sure what, but I think if you are one of them, please take the lead. I mean, you have more knowledge. Probably you can add more value to the ecosystem of open source world, right? You can create some projects. You can actually drive what is there. You can add features. I mean, let just forget about actually contributing to code. You already work somewhere. You already know the pains in your project, right? And in case it is coming from some open source project, you know this can be improved. Just go ahead and at least create a feature request or bug fixes, rather than actually asking your question on Stack Overflow. Just go to the GitHub. I mean, it's open, right? All the projects are available. Just go ahead and do that. Create the issue, let them know about what's wrong. I have seen a lot of actually developers who keep and watch on Stack Overflow just because they can get some simple issues. I mean, some cases, of course, complex issues as well, which actually they go to GitHub repository and then solve it. You can also be that guy, rather than actually just going to Stack Overflow. Go to GitHub and share what you saw or how it can be improved. A lot of things to do.
I completely agree, because I mean, when you're working as a professional, you come across a lot of different kind of use cases. Where you're using, let's say, an open source library, and you run into an issue. It could be a configuration issue. It could be an environment-based issue. And if you're asking your question on Stack Overflow, people are solving them. But of course, there could be other people in other working professional, or it could be even students who might face similar kind of an issue. So being able to share that as an issue on GitHub definitely makes a lot of sense. Vinit, would you also want to share some insights on some best practices?
Sure. So I think Santosh, Ankit, and all have covered most of the things. So I'll just talk about a few more things. Like open source is like more of culture, right? It's more of collaboration. So I think the more you collaborate, the more you get from the community. So as a beginner, like what would I would suggest, right? As a beginner, never target like bigger organization, maybe Node.js or let's say React, because as a beginner it might be difficult. But trust me, there are a lot of very popular npm modules out there which has a very less contributions, right? And a lot of open issues. So you might be interested in checking that out as a beginner. So that really helps for beginners, right? And like another good part is that no matter whether you are fixing a typo, you are writing documentation for any popular library, it's also counted as a contributions, right? So if you see, right, a lot of popular npm modules, a lot of popular library doesn't have proper documentation, right? If you are setting up that project, you go to readme, you won't find proper instructions, right? You have to google it out and then find, because what happens, like the maintainers, if they are running on mac os, they are running on linux, they write the instruction based on based on their platform. But sometimes you have to install the things, install a dependency on windows or other platform. Why can't you make that readme better, right? Just add a pull request and add steps for other channels. Other area would be to contribute as a beginner is that a lot of popular library doesn't have unit test. I can spot a lot of good libraries which have very less test coverage, right? And which has $1 million on npm. So you might be interested in writing tests for them. I think writing and reading unit test is another good way to start to contribute to some open source project. And of course, like the discussion is something which I really love on github, right? So we start discussions and a lot of good ideas come there. And I really like the point that Santosh has pointed out, right? This is something which I personally follow. So basically, like whenever you are working with like every company, right? I mean, every engineer is some way they are dependent on some sort of open source modules, libraries, or tech stacks, right? So if you find some problems, go ahead and raise an issue there, raise a bug, so that maintainers will come to know about that, right? If you are in habit of getting your doubts resolved through Stack Overflow, meaning that maintainer will never come to know about that there is a gap in their module, right? So I think it's a very good idea to always create an issue, and you are making that particular project a better, right? And maintainer will always welcome you with your doubts and with your issues, and they'll be grateful that you pointed them out that this is something which is not working as expected. I think that's it. And for students, I would always say, like these programs like Hacktoberfest, Google Summer of Code, there are so many programs, right, which is student friendly to just to onboard you to the GitHub so that you can kickstart your open source journey from there, and then there is no going back once you start. Thanks, Siva.
Yep. Thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, really amazing points. Harsh specifically spoke about what not to do when you start off introducing yourself to the community, and we had points from Santosh, Oleg regarding what exactly is open source and how contributors can get started. But can we also probably just discuss about some of the things that contributors should also keep in mind when it comes to making their first ever pull requests? What are the kind of steps that they should follow in order to sort of abide with the best practices when it comes to open source? So it could be with respect to using appropriate branch name, pull request, or let's say the code that they're actually writing. If we can sort of look into that as well, because a lot of times people make a lot of mistakes when they're either writing the code or the commit messages that they're having. So we can probably just discuss something about those, and from your personal experiences that you have had, or what kind of guidelines are being looked at in your respective organizations. Would love to sort of have your take on that. So Ankit, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad to do that. So, like, I think the biggest thing that at least I was stuck with, or I think most people would be stuck with, would be understanding exactly how Git works, right? And it doesn't need to be Git as VC. Maybe someone uses Mercurial. So I think Mozilla is one such organization which still uses Mercurial. But like, even leaving that aside, one of the biggest things that any contributor should do, in my opinion, is just take a dig at Git and understand how it works. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that newcomers would make is uh, just believing that the UI will do everything for you, but in most cases it will not. So like one of the most common things, like if it's a complicated merge conflict, like there's no way that a UI is going to let you do that. Maybe you can use something like Sublime Merge, or one of those new ones which will actually make you do it visually. But if you understand how things like rebases work, how you can avoid having to use merge conflicts at all. Like for example, I think one thing that everyone should do is to just set the default pull merge strategy to a rebase by default instead of opting for a merge, because in that case it will not do a merge commit and your maintainers will be like, okay, he understands how it works, this is great. Because one thing that people don't want is maybe like they just don't want the merge commits, because in that case it kind of rewrites history. But if you rebase, it basically means that your commits are done on top of the head, right? Which is basically what most maintainers would want. So I think like one basic thing that you need to do is understand how you exactly want your branches to work. So a very common way of doing is versioning using branches, and then also having releases or tags, which are basically like Git tags, where each tag acts as a version. So if you're like if you want to roll back to a previous version, you can essentially use Git to rewind to the previous version and rebase your commits on top. And the point is, you won't be able to do all of this if you don't exactly understand how to do it using Git first. Like, surely you can just do Git checkout and just get those and then work on those. But let's say that you want to go back, but if you don't know Git rebase, you can't do that. So I think one good thing would be to always keep Git docs on hand. Also, one thing that I've seen, and this is a mistake that I make, is that I forget to run the linter. So if someone has a CI setup that has a linter already set up in it, you have to run it. Okay, like that's the reason that the workflow exists, is so that it gets picked up. So like if you miss it, like it's not an issue. Feel free to do it again. But I think one good approach in that would be to just kind of squash your lint fix commits into the previous commit instead of having two separate commits. So it can be like one unified commit. Also, another big issue that I find is that you do not make commits atomic in nature. So this is a very common thing that you should do, is that each commit should only do one thing. If your commit, like let's say that you're making lint fixes in one commit, right? And the next commit is basically to fix this regression bug that has been existing for the last 5 versions. What you should do is to make sure that each commit only does one thing. It shouldn't be, your commit message shouldn't say fixing lint and fixing the bug from 5 versions ago. We don't want that. Also, another thing would be commit messages. Now that I've said this, writing good commit messages is very important. I'm not asking you to put emojis. I'm not asking you to put the GitHub emoji. Like, as long as it's a commit that's descriptive and concise, we'll take it. So what that means is you don't need to list everything that you've done in the commit. It doesn't need to be upgraded package from this to this, fix bug from this to this, fix lint. It doesn't need to be like that. Just be like lint fix, then maybe the whatever thing you fixed, or maybe you fixed a certain bug, and then it can be like fixed the existing typo. It can be anything like that. And one of the most important things that I have to add is even the little things can be commits. So I think a lot of contributors think that it has to be something important. It really doesn't have to be. So just to give an example, we have an epic bug, right? As in not an epic bug, like an epic task or a ticket, where basically it's just a combination of like 50 or 100 commits that people have made at one time. And those are just to fix typos in the code base. So even a contribution as simple as fixing a typo, maybe changing an article from A to N, much appreciated, because trust me, like software devs, we will take any contribution you have. And so like even the small things, we want all of that. And I think that's pretty much it from me.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great insights on how to use Git efficiently. Because I mean, I can definitely understand when you have so many, like such a large set of contributors working on a single project, you'll find such kind of merge conflicts happening, and then a lot of time people just really do not know how to use Git effectively to, let's say, and they just sort of stay behind and they get confused, like what should we do. So learning Git at its core and understanding how it works is really important. So yeah, thank you so much, Ankit, for sharing that. Harsh, would you want to go next?
Sure. So I guess Ankit has added a lot of great points. I have just shared a blog, oh shit Git, and it is basically a very real world use case of how you can use Git for various problems that you encounter. So being really good at Git is one of the most essential criteria if you're contributing to open source. But again, no one is an expert. So most of the times you will be finding yourself doing Stack Overflow search to basically arrive at particular solutions. From my perspective, I'm more of a DevOps person. So I would really say that if you're trying to contribute, just have a look at the workflows that exist. So a lot of the projects these days use GitHub Actions. When I was working at Red Hat, we used to use Travis and Jenkins. So we had a lot of configurations going on. We used to have a lot of tests, lints, and all of the same. So that can give you a very much insight on what would happen if you commit some code. So when I was starting with open source, I used to do blind commits. So I used to just commit a change and I used to send that back to the PR. And that used to break some of the other tests most often. So once I understood that, yes, these workflows are running and this is the exact purpose of the same, I started being more conscious about it. So in a standard workflow file, you will find a lot of things. You will find that there is a build step, there is an install step, there are specific lints, tests, and this will give you a very holistic insight on what would happen once you land your contribution. So most of the projects are quite picky about having all of the CI checks being green. Some of the projects are not, but you should try to ensure that whatever you do, it should not ideally break something. I have broken something really big at one of the big projects that I remember. And I simply did not get the time to go back to the same because I did not run the test locally. And they did not have those configurations on the main repository itself. So don't make the same mistake as me. Try to have a holistic insight onto how tests work, on how the whole test suite works and all of that. And that would ensure that we're landing some quality contributions. Apart from it, try to be documentative in your approach. So I don't exactly remember, but I saw a Twitter user almost a few months back who basically recorded an entire Loom video once she had submitted a pull request. So that was a very great way of communicating the entire feature with a particular maintainer. So you should not be recording some videos and all of that, but what you can instead do is try to be really documentative in whatever you're trying to put into it. So if you're trying to implement some feature or maybe you're fixing some bug, just try to document it in a simple manner, which can act as a reference for someone else who might be fixing that same thing out. So once I had a really great problem with fixing the PWA plugin on Docusaurus, and I was not really able to find a solution for the same, but I just figured out that there is an existing repository and there is a solution over there. So I can just use that to fix my own problem. So document whatever you are coming across. It can be either on the community specific channels like Slack or Discord or IRC, or you can just document it over the issue and the PR, and that would be really good.
Makes a lot of sense, Harsh, because I've also seen this thing that some of the folks, what they'll do is they'll write a blog post about it. And that's a really great way because, of course, you'll definitely come across someone who might be trying to solve a similar kind of a problem. So, of course, you might have solved that issue in the pull request that you have submitted. But if you're also additionally creating some kind of, let's say, a blog post or like a video, as you mentioned, that will be beneficial for others also who might be contributing to such kind of different things. So yeah, thank you so much, Harsh, for pointing that out. And Oleg, probably, I guess this might be the because you're definitely the most experienced in this entire ecosystem. So would love to know about your insights as well for best practices.
Yeah. So when you contribute, my recommendation would be to follow the contributing guidelines. Because when you take an active project which actively onboards contributors, most likely there will be guidelines available for newcomers. For example, contributing MD, which is a part of standard GitHub metadata these days, or there might be good first issues with a detailed description of what a contributor is expected to do. And my advice for every newcomer contributor would be to follow these guidelines, to follow, for example, pull request templates, if they exist, to follow guidelines in the documentation. Because if you don't, it immediately sets you on a kind of collision course with the community. It's quite popular when newcomer contributors create pull requests, let's say, without documentation, without explaining what changes. Of course, if you just submit a typo fix, it's not a problem. But when you submit a feature, when you submit a bug fix, then there might be some specific requirements, for example, for changelog automation or for code review process. And if the community is active, then they already have all this documentation for you, and please follow that. So it would be the most important ask. And as a maintainer in Hacktoberfest, I definitely receive a lot of pull requests that do not follow the documentation, and please focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is something that I have experienced as while I started out with contributing. So I was doing some contributions to FOSS Asia, but each and every time my contribution just used to my pull request used to get closed, and I mean it did take me quite a while. So I was part of this developer sprint that was happening in New Delhi, and that is the time when I actually got to know that we have to follow the contributing guidelines, because that contributing markdown file can have a lot of different things, including what your your commit message should be like, what your pull request template like, or the message of the pull request, and even actually when it comes to the best practices when it comes to writing your code. So whether let's say when you're writing, you're working on a React based project, so whether you should use a cross function or a normal function, or you should use a cross let's say class based component or a functional component. So you'll find some repositories having very specific guidelines when it comes to how you have to even create function names or variable names. And if you're not following them, then there's a huge likelihood that it might actually result in your your pull request getting declined, or you might have to make additional changes. So I completely agree with Oleg that the first thing that you have to do is research about the project, try to run it locally, and do look at the contributing guidelines. Thank you so much, Oleg, for pointing that out. Santosh, if you want to go next with respect to this particular topic.
Yeah, sure. So as Oleg mentioned, please read contributing.md file. It is there for a purpose. So it has everything, how you can actually create your branches, how you can actually mention your commit messages. And apart from contributing.md, some practices which you should follow is, in case you are actually raising a feature, just don't go and blindly raise the feature request. Please actually document it. Otherwise, it will be chances that you invested your 10-15 days and finally it was rejected because it was not useful for the project. Or even in the same case, in case of you find some bug, please discuss with the maintainers first. Don't try to actually just go ahead and jump on and start uh, creating PRs. Discuss with the maintainers if they are accepting new feature requests or bug fixes, because sometimes you don't see it, but some projects are already marked as archived, and then you will end up actually raising a PR which will never be merged. So keep and watch for those things before you go ahead and raise your PRs. And also, just wanted to add one more point. Don't be pushy. So in case you raise a PR, maintainers are human. So it's not like you should go ahead and ping them every day. Is it getting merged or not? Don't do follow which will irritate the maintainers. So of course, everyone is like doing open source in their free time. So respect that.
So it's a valid point, and I can completely agree with that, because a lot of times the maintainers themselves have some kind of full-time job they're doing, or even if they are working full-time in that particular project, they will have to do a lot of other things as well apart from just looking at your pull request, because large projects might have 100, 200, 500 plus issues and pull requests lined up. So yeah, definitely you need to be cognizant of their time as well, and because they are looking at a lot of other things rather than just your particular pull request or an issue that you might have created. So a really valid point. And Vinit, finally, if you would want to also share some thoughts.
Sure. So I think most of the points are already covered. I was just listening carefully to everyone, just to find some points which I can actually speak. So I think everyone talked about contributing MD, PR template, issue template, even atomic commit messages tag. But one thing I want to add is that commit messages, in my opinion, it should never be in past tense. It should be in the present tense. Imperative sentences should be there. That's a very valid point. There are a lot of arguments around this, like it should be in past tense, but I think the most of the community agrees on that it should be in present tense in imperative. It should be imperative sentence, because after applying that, yeah, it depends upon project. That's correct, Oleg. So some people are following that, but I think in my opinion, like I go for present tense, but it's totally up to the arguments. And then The next point which I want to mention is that whenever you raise a PR, right? So basically, what happens that if you are making a UI fix, it's always good to put screenshots, what like how it's going to affect the UI, and maybe if you could deploy it somewhere in any free hosting provider, let's say Netlify or on, give some preview link so that it will make the PR reviewers life easier, right? And explain all your changes in PR description. So basically, what you have done, why you have done, because it's just by looking at the code, it's very difficult to actually review, right? I mean, what changes and what was your thought process. So then comes the documenting your code, right? So I think one thing that to note is that whenever you are writing code for open source, think of your code quality as well. So write your code like you speak, right? So I think the better code is one which just by looking at the code, I can understand the whole code, right? Meaning that your functions, variables should be named properly. You should be following the lint rules, which is specified by that particular project. You should be following the code standard of that particular thing. Let's say if you are using JSDoc, if you should use JSDoc. If you are using ESLint, so you should follow that, because I mean that's a good idea, because otherwise maintainer will come and they will comment that okay, add JSDoc, comments are missing. It should be encapsulated in a function. You can put it in the utils. Why to put it in the main file? So all those mistakes you should not make. So just by looking at the code directory structure and the coding practices and standard, you will come to know that what's the expectations from the maintainer. So I think that is something that while making the pull request, we should actually keep in mind, right? That code quality matters a lot, because if you don't follow the code quality at the first place, it will delay your PR, right? So I mean, there will be multiple reviews and you have to go around in number of reviews, and you might even end up that your PR might get declined if they think that you are not actually making up to their expectations. So I think that is one thing which I wanted to share. But I think other things we already have covered.
Yeah, thank you so much for raising those points. And it's really great to also understand the perspective from everyone regarding how can new contributors get started and some of the best practices that one should maintain. So I would like to probably just take this time to also, first of all, ask the audience who is tuning in live right now to also ask you questions. We'll be very soon picking up the Q&A section as well. But would just love to know from each one of you what your respective communities are doing specifically for new contributors. What's the kind of process like, and especially for Hacktoberfest, or what are the different kind of initiatives that all of you are taking up to promote open source? Would love to know. Starting off with Ankit.
Yeah, sure. So one thing is that Wikimedia Foundation doesn't really have any Hacktoberfest specific events. So like you won't really find repos that will get you those PRs or anything of that sort, sadly. But like we are doing new things all the time. So like we have our Wikimedia Foundation's outreach team. So basically Shishti, basically my team lead, who's basically responsible for just kind of bringing new maintainers and all of that stuff. So just to talk about from my perspective, or basically how Wikimedia works is like we have specialized documentation for new developers. So I'll just drop you the link to that in a bit. Apart from that, what I basically want to talk about is, for example, how do I handle it at Polygon, right? So like a lot of people will probably not know this, but a lot of the code that we write at Polygon is open source. And the reason we do that is because when you're building on blockchain, like you really wanted all of it to be existing for other people to see, because so to say, like blockchain is money. So if you are going to trust someone with money, the obviously easiest way would be to, you know what, you can see the code, you decide what you want to do or not. And so like the point about blockchain is that it's about transparency, it's about openness. And if you're looking to get started in a space that is not Web 2, feel free to come to Web 3. I don't know, like you might think I'm biased because obviously I work at Polygon. Obviously, crypto is the new big thing, right? Like, but I don't think I don't think of it like that at all. I think what's most important is for you to find something that you actually want to work on. And for me, that was blockchain after a long time. But for you, that might be maybe a package in Julia. Like there's really so many different things. I think as Oleg was saying, right, there's like just too many things for you to contribute to What really matters is what you want to do and what you want to write code in. And again, like, it doesn't need to be code. It can be blog posts. Like Harsh, probably like one of the most prolific blog post writers I've seen. I have no idea how he does it. Like, if you ask me, I wrote like one blog for 2 weeks, so like 2 blog posts, and then I just gave up for a month. So some people can do it, some can't. And that's the magic of open source, right? Like, there's just so much to do, and you have so many options that there is really no compulsion for you to just pick one and go with it. So like, and like, now when we're coming to Hacktoberfest specific events, I feel that we kind of take this thing too far. So like, I like, all of us probably here know that like open source is great, but if the open source happens only during Hacktoberfest, maybe you're not going about it the right way. So what's important is that you care about the spirit of open source, and you care about what Hacktoberfest is about, which is open source. Just keep that in mind. And as Oleg was saying, like, just do what the right thing is. There's no need to spam PRs. Come on, man. People are going to get to you. Don't worry about it. There's always things to do. Don't worry about it. That's what I have to say about it.
Absolutely, such amazing points, Ankit, regarding the main spirit of Hacktoberfest. And it's not Hacktoberfest itself; it's open source, because you can
Exactly.
start contributing to open source not only in October but throughout the year at any point of time. But of course, I mean, the initiative is more to just get people know about, and we do see it's really great that we do see a lot of new contributors coming in during this time. But yes, like,
Exactly.
as being practitioners for open source, we need to direct them in the right direction of open source and not Hacktoberfest. So
Exactly.
yeah, definitely a lot of valid points. Harsh, would you want to go next?
Sure. So right now I'm associated with 3 open source communities. So let me first start with my full-time job itself. So I'm working at Quantsite Labs, and Quantsite Labs is basically the open source research division of Quantsite AI. So if you are a data science practitioner or a machine learning engineer, then perhaps you will find a lot of people from some of the big libraries and packages like NumPy, SciPy, all of them at Quantsite itself. So right now we are trying to migrate the entire build system of SciPy from setup tools to Meson. So I don't know how many of you are following this, but the setup tools will be deprecated in the upcoming Python versions. And this is why we want to move to a new build system. So we have very few options here. The one is CMake, which is quite popular with C++-based projects. And the other one is Meson. And right now we are using Meson to migrate the entire build system. So I will be sharing one of the blogs here, which has been written by Ralph Gommers. He's one of the maintainers of SciPy and one of the most prolific mentors you will find in the Python open source community. And I've been working with him for the past 3 months now on basically creating an entire CI matrix on GitHub Actions for the new Meson build system. So some of the few nits and grits has been done, but we are still looking for new people who can help us out with some specific GitHub action workflows and more of that. So feel free to reach out to us on the SciPy repository itself, but don't reach out on the specific main repository. Instead, there is a specific fork which is being run by Ralph himself. So I'm just dropping the link here and it will be shared on the YouTube live chat. So you will be able to see that whatever we are doing, it is on a particular Meson branch, and you can see what work we are doing right there. So right now we have reduced the whole build time by almost 4 times. So it is one of the best things that will be coming out of the PyData community. For my GSoC org, MetaCall, we are not doing a lot of things. I guess our maintainer is not very familiar with Hacktoberfest itself, but we still have a few projects up in the pipeline. So MetaCall is pretty much compatible only with Linux as of now, while Docker-based distributions are available from Mac and Windows. But we are trying to create a distributable for Windows as well. So I will just drop the link from MetaCall itself, and you can have a look over all of the active projects. So MetaCall core itself is a very big project. It has been developed over the past 4 years. And right now it only supports a handful of languages like C#, Python, JavaScript, Ruby, and all of that. So we would need some support for Rust. Ankit, please take note. And then we have got the support for Java as well, which is upcoming, Golang, TypeScript, and more of that. And we are also trying to create an open source version of our FAS. So for people who are familiar with tools like Azure Functions or AWS Lambda, MetaCall has created its own version of the same. And it basically provides its own protocol, which is much different from HTTPS or gRPC. And it is almost 15 to 30 times faster. So we are trying to create an open source version of it, so you can contribute to that as well. And Mojo Global is participating in Hacktoberfest. I guess I have shared the repository for that beforehand. So we have like 3 to 4 projects: community website, Flint UI, the Mojo Global docs. We are not taking in any contributions for the actual Flint project itself, which is an MRV that was developed in association with the Kenyan government, the Mullion Group, which is in Australia, and the Natural Resources Canada, because we still have a release coming on that, and we are taking only the contributions from the core maintainers. But we would be more than happy to have your contributions on the other sub projects that are basically creating the whole Mojo Global community itself. If you go to a particular GSoC repo, you will find a proposal from me, and we are basically taking up volunteers for our documentation working group. So if you're interested in documentation, web development, outreach, evangelism part, so you can just fill up that form and we will just add you to our bi-weekly meetings, and we will have fun rolling out from there.
Thank you so much, Harsh. A lot of great information about Mojo Global, MetaCall, and the other orgs like SkyPy. So thank you so much. Oleg, would want to go next?
Yeah, sure. For getting started and for contributing, many projects have permanent onboarding links, not just for Hacktoberfest, but for any time of the year. So, for example, in Jenkins, we have invested a lot in contributing guidelines, and there is a page, jenkins.io/participate. So I shared the link, and it documents various types of collaboration. So our idea was that it would be a page which everyone can navigate quickly and find a place to contribute, because Jenkins is a huge project. And in the beginning, somebody mentioned that do not start from big projects. It's a valid point in general case, but at the same time, big projects have a lot of sub-projects, and by providing good documentation, they could advise people to join sub-community so they can start really in the big project. And we have invested a lot to help contributors. And for example, if you navigate to this page, we also have a GitHub chat for specifically for newcomers. So everyone is welcome to join and just ask questions. And recently we also started Discourse, which you can also join and ask any questions along with mailing lists. So in the community, we use these resources to streamline onboarding of newcomer contributors. And it actually helps a lot. And yeah, as always, we invite newcomer contributors to also contribute to onboarding guidelines, because we as experienced contributors do not see many issues others may experience. So if you go through these guidelines in Jenkins or in any other projects, if you see any obstacle, any impediment, please submit an issue, because it will be available information. And if you see how to improve it, just submit a pull request. It will also help a lot. So that's what I wanted to mention. And yeah, if you navigate to other pages, yeah, for example, in almost all Linux Foundation projects, having such participation and contributing guidelines and onboarding guidelines is a mandatory requirement for the certification. So for many major projects like Kubernetes, OpenTelemetry, Jenkins, whatever, almost everywhere you will find such materials. And I guess any big community invests in that a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Oleg. Yeah, because like it's really important that when you're contributing to a lot of these large projects, like Jenkins is quite large, that you follow the right kind of rule sets. And I think you had also shared about the Hacktoberfest specific event that is being organized by Jenkins. So if you want to speak about that.
Yeah, sure. We had one event yesterday. So there was a first online meetup where we basically introduced Jenkins and some of our featured projects. So in Jenkins, we offer everyone to participate everywhere, but we also provide a few featured areas on our website. because we have a roadmap in the project and we would like to facilitate particular items. So for example, documentation improvements, particular projects like Jenkins file runner, or static analysis at the moment. So for these projects, we basically created additional description, additional documentation. We created newcomer-friendly issues, and we listed on our website. And we also invited maintainers of these particular areas to present and to provide some initial guidelines. So this is what we've done yesterday, and we will keep doing it during Hacktoberfest. So if you're interested, there is Jenkins Online meetup, and there will be publishing links to events we organize. And yeah, I believe that we will also try additional channels this time, for example, Twitter Spaces and other channels like that, because they have proved to be very efficient. So stay tuned for additional announcements.
Yep. Thank you so much, Oleg. Then Santosh, if you want to go next.
Yeah. So me and my co-founder, who is Lars, and actually he's also one of the GitHub star from Denmark. So we have already we started it this year something called This Is Learning, which is like open source. We have a lot of we are trying to promote the open learning, and the resources should be free. So we already have some repositories. I was just trying to get him on board to actually open those repositories for Hacktoberfest. So as we mentioned, right, Hacktoberfest or open source is just not about writing code. So in case you want to actually improve the resources which we have a lot of repository for RxJS, NGRX, Angular. So in case you want to actually write some topic, you can choose it from the GitHub itself. I'll share it because right now it's not part of Hacktoberfest. I have to go ahead and add the label. That's what we are doing as I already mentioned on Twitter that I won't be participating personally, but I'll be helping others. So in case you need any help, let me know. I'll be part of multiple talks as well. I mean, I'm here. Shiva invited me here, so I'll be a part of few more discussions which will be happening across the Hacktoberfest. And at the around 22nd, between 22nd and 24th, I think we are also having DevFest India. So I think that's it. That is something also you should look out for. We will be having a lot of talks and a lot of initiatives there as well. So yeah, that's it.
Right, and finally, Vinit.
Hey, so for from Postman, I mean, students have an opportunity to actually join our Hacktoberfest event. So I guess I have already shared the link on chat. So you can follow the blog by Andrea. Andrea is basically students community manager for Postman, and I think her blog walks you through how you can actually complete your Hacktoberfest challenge with Postman. Other than that, I think Postman is actually part of GSoC as well, and we have a few projects there that you can check on our organization. So I work as a mentor there, and I maintain one project called Async API Diff, which is again, as you might be knowing, that Async API is now part of Postman. So Async API community is also accepting a lot of contributions from newcomers and newbies out there. So maybe people will be interested in checking out Async API organization as well as the Postman organization, and do check out the blog which I have shared for Postman guideline to be part of Hacktoberfest. I think that's it from my end. But I think for Postman, I think you might be knowing that Postman itself is started as an open source project back in 2012, if I'm not wrong. Right? So I think we actually in our org, we respect open source, we follow open source, and we always try to make GitHub a better place to be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vinit. And Vinit has also opened up a really great initiative for connecting mentors at Hacktoberfest with mentees. So you can definitely also check that out. Thank you so much, Vinit. I think that sort of covers most of the points that I wanted to have, but we can probably just take up a few of the questions that people have been asking in the comment section. So the first question that we have is by Sushant, who asks, can you please provide some efficient way of how can we work around managing college and open source at the same time? And probably, I would like to add on to this is that for working professionals who want to contribute, how can they spend their time with their regular jobs and also contributing to open source. So I mean, specifically for college students, I would like to ask Ankit and Harsh, because Harsh is still in college and Ankit just graduated this year, I guess. So if probably Ankit and Harsh, if we can start off with college specifically.
All right. Sure. Like, so right now, like I've been full time for like 2 months and interning. So like I was interning while in college. So that's when I started off, I think in March, right? And I think one of the biggest things that you need to understand about open source is you can look at it as a side job, right? It doesn't need to be the primary thing that you invest your time into every day. Now it's perfectly amazing that if you want to do that, right? But it's not a necessity for to do that. For example, like obviously I couldn't, right? Because like if you're interning and you're in college, there's no way that you're going to be able to commit 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week to open source. So what I suggest and the way that I generally want to contribute to open source, and like I'll tell you the reason at the end, is that generally what I do is try contribute to packages that I already use. So like very recently, like I just raised an issue with Grant, which is basically an OAuth package. And I knew exactly what there needed to be done. So I just kind of made a description. I just wrote everything in the issue. And the maintainer, since the maintainer was already active, they just picked whatever I wrote in the PR and just committed that, right? So it doesn't even need to be code. It can be just a solution to a particular problem. And even that can be an open source contribution. And so another thing that the reason I'm telling you to kind of not invest all your time into it is that open source burnout is a real thing, right? So like this is something that I had to deal with in the past, where I was much more active in the open source and I was trying to go at it with different ways. So like back in the days when I was practicing DSA, and if you're doing DSA, it just takes up way too much of your time. Also, I hate DSA, so that's probably why it takes so much time. But if you're doing like DSA, if you're doing college, if you're doing hackathons all at the same time, then chances are you're going to have burnout. So what I suggest is to maybe devote half an hour to it, maybe devote 1 hour to it. But if you invest more than what you can afford to give, you're going to have burnout. So especially if you're in college or a working professional, it's important to recognize the privilege that open source gives you and the fact that you have something to work on, but also understand that helping others can only be done in situation where you actually can afford that. If you do not have the time or you do not have the mental capacity to do that, just take some time off, cool off, and then come back to contributing. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense because sorry.
Yeah, I completely agree with whatever Ankit said, and I'm perhaps a bad person to take an advice from because I rarely attend my college classes, and it has been almost a year and a half since I attended any class. So I won't advise much on that, but I will just add one more point. If you're contributing to open source, try to understand the impact that you're creating. So in open source communities, we have got two sort of impact. The first one is the additive impact. So if I'm writing some code, some documentation, some fixes, some features, what I'm essentially doing is trying to create an additive impact. It can be measured, it can be taken care of, and I can perhaps show that on my blog or on my slides and whatever. Multiplicative impact is all about helping out the new contributors getting started up. So what Vinit is doing, what Santosh is doing, what Oleg is doing, they're trying to create a lot of multiplicative impact. They're mentoring new individuals, they're bringing them on board, they're having them contribute. And in turn, they are doing sort of an additive impact. So even if you are getting burnt out by the whole open source stuff, there were some situations where I had to review more than 20 to 30 pull requests on a single day. So that was a specific burnout for me. So try to take some of the time off and try to find out the ways in which you can create a multiplicative impact. So mentor new people, help them out with their issues, and see if they can actually do some good in a particular open source community. And that would be all cool. Over to you, Shivai.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. And the burnout is definitely a real cause of concern that can actually take place, and it's completely fine to experience that. But yes, the end result is that you have to sort of find the balance between your college studies and your contributions that you're making either to open source or any other kind of initiatives that you're doing. Just do it till the time that you can actually handle that work, and don't let it overburden or overstress you. So definitely a lot of great valid points. But would also now love to know from Oleg, Santosh, and Vinit, um, probably
Yeah.
to
So
the other part of it. It could either be with college as well, but also if you're a working professional, how can you spend time
so I
contributing to
think
open source?
like I'll go first, Oleg, if that's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, so I want to make one point here, right? So as a student, everyone makes a mistake. I too made the same mistake, right? So like open source world, Twitter, LinkedIn are all quite fascinates us. People are doing a lot of things out there, and we directly jump there, right? We started following tutorials and undo, and we always leave our fundamentals, and that costs you a lot in your career, right? So I think I one thing which I want to say is that before becoming a software developer, try to become a software engineer first, right? And software engineer is one who knows the fundamentals of computer, right? Be it operating system, computer networks, databases, or data stores. And it's really important to understand these, right? Because once you work at scale, then you'll realize. I mean, when I started working for Postman and when I had to write code which can be scaled for 10 million user, 15 million user, then I realized like how my, fundamental concept is coming into the picture. Because see, like Facebook will never hire you to use React, right? They will hire you to build software designs, right? So I think as a student you have to understand that like before actually learning cool stuff like React or Angular, maybe machine learning or whatnot, first understand the basics. That's really important, right? You know how to use Node.js, but Node.js organization will never hire you, right? Because Node.js itself is built on top of C++. The underlying principle is always the same. That revolves, for network calls or for file management. They are using C++, meaning that you have to understand the fundamentals. So I think for any bigger organization, for any bigger project, if you think that DSA is not coming into your picture and DSA is not helping you, meaning that the code that you are writing is not scalable, not maintainable. That's what my personal experience. But I think I would love to hear from others. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely a really valid point regarding being clear of the fundamentals. Because, of course, even if you are working on some kind of a project, you'll still use some kind of a use case of, like, for example, if you're contributing to CNCF related projects, you would require networking based concepts because a lot of it is related to open telemetry, like Oleg mentioned. Yeah, definitely a really great point. Oleg, would you want to go next?
I definitely support the idea that a good foundation is needed for open source work, like for many engineering work. At the same time, contributing to open source is one of the great ways to improve your skills, whether it's your direct work responsibility or not. Because yeah, in open source you can follow your passion. You can be a full-time software engineer, but you like designing things, artwork. Okay, you can do it for open source. Or maybe you could organize meetups, talk to people, or opposite, whatever you do at work. If you want to practice coding, contributing to open source is also a great opportunity because you can find mentors, you can find good documentation, you can find tutorials, and you can find reviewers, which is one of the most valuable things and which is not always available. For example, if you study in university, you rarely get a code review for your course project, right? It's either works and you passed, or it doesn't work and you're passed anyway, or something like that. So in open source, you actually get a lot of opportunities to study, and for me, this is one of the biggest advantage, because yeah, some people contribute to open source because it's their passion, but it's not necessary. And it's not the case for the 99% of contributors. They contribute either to study, to build their portfolio, to deliver on their work responsibilities, or etc., etc. There is a good talk from FOSDEM about how to be a selfish contributor or something like that. I can find a link. And it might sound terrible, but it's actually a really great talk. And don't forget that whatever you do, whether it's contribution or work, it should contribute to your own personal or career goals. And open source is a great instrument for that and a great venue for that. That's it.
Absolutely makes sense. So Santosh, if you
Yeah, actually, I just saw a tweet which says upskilling is your responsibility, and that's what I believe in. And as a working professional, of course, you have to upskill yourself. And open source is one of the best way. Actually, that was the reason actually I started contributing to Angular. That of course I'm upskilling myself, but I'm also helping others, right? So do that. I mean, in case as I mentioned, when you don't write a code, that's absolutely fine. Raising bugs or raising feature requests, that's also contribution. So get involved into the open source. It will of course help you. But also other point which I agree to, which Ankit and Harsh already mentioned, burnout, right? So make sure that you're not doing it um, doing it like every time. I had multiple burnouts like in last 2 years. So I mean, give yourselves enough time to actually take some rest, focus on your health as well. Otherwise, of course, if you just keep doing it, at one point of time you will just feel like, okay, I don't want to do it anymore, right? So do that as well. Take care of yourself as well.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And as we're coming to an end, I think we have a couple of other quite common questions. And one is, do I need to be a computer science engineer to contribute to open source? Probably a lot of times we see this happening, and I see a lot of smiling faces. So we can go, if anyone wants to pick up this answer, pick up this question.
Well, I can start. I am not a software engineer. Actually, I have higher education in hardware and in economics. And well, I had some software development courses, but yeah, the most of my industry software development is actually self-education. And open source has been one of the engines for my continued self-education in the recent years.
Yeah, really valid point.
Just to add, I mean, I'm a CS graduate, but I don't think so. My CS degree actually helped me to get a great job, or even gave me enough knowledge so I can start coding. I learned coding by myself. I'm a self-taught developer. It's not like college helped me or something. So I don't believe in that. Now, the good thing about my generation and current generation is you have a lot of resources, free resources, which is available. Even in my days, actually, there were books available, but I couldn't afford it, right? I mean, they were like really costly. I was hardly able to pay for my own education, so it was just out of scope. But now the good thing is, even though you don't have money, it's absolutely fine. You have access to internet everywhere. Just go to YouTube. Free Code Camp is doing amazing thing to make learning feasible for everyone. So utilize those. You don't have to get a degree. I don't believe in it.
So I think Shiva knows this, but I'm from DU, right? So, I mean, okay, so like I'm going to be honest with you. College taught me nothing. Okay, like if I had to give you the exact amount of things I learned in college, it will be exactly zero things. And the real reason I learned things is that after my first semester, I started doing hackathons. Um, Interestingly, I knew about Shiva then, but never got to participate with him. I was still got to know about him, and I think then we participated a couple of years later. And I think hackathons is literally what brought me to software development. So if you are starting off right now, um, and I think a lot of people are going to hate me for this, don't do DSF first. Just do a bit of software development, because like I'm just being honest. But once you have the knack of wanting to write software, you're going to manage DSA just fine. That's what I feel, at least.
Harsh, would also love to know your take on it.
Yes. So actually, my mentor, he's actually a PhD in neurophysics. So he barely did any programming until his PhD. So when he reached his PhD, he started writing some MATLAB code. And that is when he came to know that, yes, we can do a lot of the things from here. And after that, he worked as a data scientist at a few companies, and now he's at Quantsite. So you don't need a CS degree. I'm not being radical like Ankit, saying that my college did not teach me anything. I learned some basic skills, which I'm quite thankful and I'm grateful for. But again, most of the heavy loading part you have to do outside of the college. So my journey was pretty same: hackathons, open source. I remember I was sitting in my library back in 2019, and my senior introduced open source to me. And I still remember that day I got started with open source. So college has a lot of negative things, but it has some positive aspects. So if you are in an environment, just be grateful about the same and try to utilize it to your maximum.
Yep. And Vinit, would you also want to probably take? I think you had dropped out at that point of time, but the question commonly that we're getting a lot of times were that can non-CS students can also contribute to open source.
Yeah, I think even not non-CS, but even people from the different domain, right? Let's say from journalism or from editorial, from marketing, they can also contribute. So I think the one of the GitHubs, the space, I think one of the, I think when I actually got nominated as a GitHub star, I think there was one question that GitHub PMs asked us. Santosh can actually relate to that. That like once you become GitHub star, what will be your major contribution, right? So I think my answer was that to like that open source should be for everyone, so it shouldn't be only for the techies. So I think I believe uh, everyone's is somehow related to some sort of open source ecosystem. Maybe they are using some tool, some library which is open source, right? Let's say YouTubers, they are using OBS, that's an open source tool. So that's what my take is there. So I think not even engineering, but from different domain, everyone can do open source. So that's why we call it open source, right? It's open for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think Harsh, you want to speak? Sorry.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a real life example on Vinit's statement. So I was associated with an org called Blockchain Commons. It was at a time when I was totally inspired by Ankit's work and I wanted to try some blockchain. Unfortunately, that did not go really well. So it is an open source community that works on blockchain infrastructure. And the fun part was some of my co-interns were actually journalism students. And they were basically working on those specific content that could help the human rights activists to better utilize blockchain and Bitcoin. So that is just an example that I wanted to convey. So no matter what background you are from, even if you're a public speaker, even if you're really good with content, you can still contribute to open source. There are some technical parts around it like Git and all of that, but I guess everyone can manage the same.
Absolutely. And we did speak about the non-code contributions that you can make. And a lot of people who might be in streaming media, they can actually help out in making these live streams that we are doing right now, and making like non-code specific documentation, community evangelism side of things, several things, right? A lot of people, I like, because I have been a part of a lot of different Twitter spaces, and I've seen a lot of people. So we have Danny Thompson, a lot of you might be knowing him. He was the chef for probably close to 10-15 years before being a software engineer, and then being a Google, working at Google as a developer advocate. And some people are coming in from wide variety of different areas like scuba diving. So one thing that I like to correlate is that when it comes to software engineering, if you have a knack for problem solving, you can very easily gain a lot of concepts of software development and actually become one. Because like, I mean, if I were to now think of about becoming a doctor at this point of time in my life, it would probably take me a good 10-15 years to just do that. But with software development, it will not take you that much amount of time. You can become a web developer in a matter of 6 months time if you just have that design aspects in your mind and you like to solve problems. And that is why software development, or even like hardware, all these are very sort of open for contributions, for even for beginners as well. Because probably as compared to someone becoming a doctor, it's much more easier. And probably someone might not like accept this kind of a conversation, but I feel that it's definitely a much more like open area to sort of look into and dive into at a much more quicker pace as someone becoming a constructor or a doctor.
So Shiva, I think this might be off topic, but I want to add a few points here, right? So I think
Yeah.
as a software engineer, the one responsibility that all of us has to make it easier to onboard people to take, right? So for example, when WordPress came, right, all the bloggers, it's very easy to set up the blog, right? They do not need to learn React or HTML or web. They can go there and create. So in the similar fashion, even GitHub, right? GitHub provides you tooling, right? GitHub desktop is there. You need not to learn the terminology like how to use Git bash or Git commands. You can do it via UI. So I think this approach, right? So basically, lesser code, right? We everyone is striving to enable workflows where you have to write very less code. Even GitHub Copilot come into the picture, right? So they are like, others who are not very good at coding, they can even write efficient code just using GitHub Copilot. Another example would be, there are a lot of website builders already there, right? You just have to drag and drop your website, complete website is ready. So because I think, software engineering needs more of creativity now, right? So I mean, we as a software engineer, we can develop the tools, because if you see, like recently in Postman we launched flows, right? So you can basically automate the whole API workflow just by drag and drop. And now to produce your API, you need not to be an engineer or backend engineer or full stack engineer. If you are a person with some idea, some creative idea to create some sort of API, you just have to drag and drop and your API will be ready to deploy, right? To get deployed, and you can share it with your consumers. So I think even Microsoft has recently worked on a project where you have to just draw the even GPT-3, that those things that you draw something, put it there, and it will convert HTML, CSS for you. Same goes for Figma, right? You design the UI and you can export as a complete HTML, CSS, JSTOR. So I think these things are there. So basically, in near future, I see that there will be a lot of toolings which will make things easier, like automation and all these things are coming into the picture.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think one really important question that I was going through the comment section was by Vedika, that she was trying to contribute to these DSA repositories in Hacktoberfest. And I'd like to probably point out this, is that a lot of times, I mean, especially with what happened during the last few years, Hacktoberfest has really, like, I mean, the team at DigitalOcean has kept really strict guidelines when it comes to, and a lot of times we see these kind of spammy repositories which invite you to just make some quick, easy pull requests and get. So you can actually report such kind of repositories if you do come across such kind of repositories, because again, what I feel is that they take out the main essence of being able to make quality contributions. So specifically, if you're trying to find out such kind of repositories, don't go for like these kind of repositories which just you will they tell you, okay, like you can contribute any kind of simple. It's not wrong, but at the same time it's taking away from the spirit of making quality contributions. So this question now sort of is for everyone: how can you find a repository which might be valid and which will help you make quality contributions? So we can probably take this up as a question. So Ankit, if you want to go next, or anyone.
Yeah, sure. So like this is gonna be, I don't know how funny with this will be to you guys, but I got my first Hacktoberfest t-shirt last year. Like I didn't know that Hacktoberfest was a thing until last year, which is very interesting because I would have assumed that I would know it before then, but somehow I didn't. So like one thing that I basically spoke about before, and I want to kind of emphasize again, is that like don't equate Hacktoberfest to open source or the other way around. You just have to understand that open source is a principle, right? That's basically what it is about. You believe in the fact that software should be free and the fact that software should be open to everyone, transparency, full transparency, right? That's basically the message that you want to send across. And I feel that if you're doing a DSA repo, fine, maybe it's fine that it's a DSA repo, but I don't feel that it's really fulfilling a need in the world where other people would want to use it, right? Like what do you hope will come of it? That Code Chef will have another challenge that will possibly have a question in that DSA repo? You think that's the best outcome that can have? I just feel like if you have time to contribute to a DSA repo, you have time to contribute to something that actually matters. And this could be anything. This could be going to Postman's documentation, finding a typo, making a pull request for that. Much appreciated. Maybe when you're so one thing that we have been trying at Wikimedia is to kind of improve onboarding for new users, because as I explained before, internal tooling means there's kind of additional hindrances than what you would usually expect. So we really want to focus on making new documentation. So like that's like GSoC, just do GSoC. You don't even need to write code. You need to be someone who is just good at technical writing, and we will be glad to have you. So if you're new to open source, always ask questions. Just get into it, dig around. Don't expect spoon feeding, but always ask questions. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. And I think Oleg also wanted to share.
Yeah, so for good repositories, there are actually a lot of highlighted issues, even on the Hacktoberfest website. There are queries, but you can understand that the repository is good just based on the activity, the number of contributors. So if the repository is maintained by a few people, it might be good or might not be, but if there are hundreds and thousands of contributors who submit real pull requests, you will be able to confirm it just in a few minutes by browsing pages. If you see that the repository has contributing guidelines, if you see that the project has clear roadmap, then it's definitely an active project, and you can start from that. Another approach is, of course, looking for tools that you actually use. Everyone uses a lot of open source tools these days. The most of developer chain, almost all compilers, and many other things. They're open source. And if you use them, then you can explore the community. And if it's active, why not contributing there?
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Like finding the tools that you use and being able to contribute to them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Anyone else? Yep.
Okay.
Anyone else? Harsh?
Yes, so I can put out my perspective about that. So the main reason why people contribute to a lot of DSA-based projects is because it has a much lower bar of contribution criteria.
Yeah.
So you practically don't need to study any code base. There is no documentation. There is no existing CI tests or anything like that. You can just simply make a PR. Maybe there would be a maintainer that would act as a human linter. They will point out some of the issues with your code, maybe some style fixes and all of that, and your PR is merged. As simple as that. So if you're very, very new to open source, it will be a very radical opinion, but you can actually contribute to a DSA-based project just to have an idea on how the whole contribution workflow looks like. So you will know how to create a branch, how to submit a PR, how to politely get all of the maintainers' requests merged, and then you can finally have your PR merged into the main code base. But once you have completed that initial barrier, you can start leveling up your skill set and you can start finding out some much more complex project. So you can try out with simple tools or libraries that you commonly use, or else you can try out building, like contributing to some larger projects if you feel that you're confident enough, and it would be all cool. So don't worry too much about finding some specific projects at first. If you're a beginner, just try out with the basic ones so that you can understand the workflow. But specifically for Hacktoberfest, don't try to contribute to DSA based projects. It can be really a platform for you to find out the big project or the big community that you want to work with and possibly make an impact with the same. So just leverage this particular mentorship and the guidance that the maintainers are providing you, and you will be doing great.
Makes a lot of sense. Vinit or Santosh, if anyone will.
So I think one last thing, as a beginner, as I think Hers very correctly pointed out, I would say, one gap on GitHub that you can actually take leverage on this Hacktoberfest is that a lot of projects doesn't have GitHub action setup for them, right? Let's say auto merging PR, or maybe adding auto labels, or adding default PR reviewers, and having some sort of rules. Let's say before merging the PR, it should ideally be actually reviewed by 3 people. All sort of workflows that you can write a GitHub action, and you can raise these pull requests to popular organizations repository, and because I think learning GitHub action will not take you more than 4 hours. Like, I think you watch some video, you will understand how does the GitHub action works, and then you can write a GitHub action for some popular organization and popular repository. So that would be really great. Like, as a maintainer, I think in one of my npm library, I have received, I guess, 1.9k pull requests so far, and now I'm looking for a contribution that if someone could write a GitHub action for me, which can basically resolve the conflicts at the same time merge all the PRs, right? So it's basically appending a codes JSON, right? So it was a very old library of mine which basically generates codes. So I don't want to mess up that because it's being used by a lot of people. and it will break for them if I manually run some bot to merge that. So I think such things are already there in a lot of organizations, so you can take leverage of that. And a lot of good projects doesn't have ESL setup. A lot of good project doesn't have JS docs. They do not have proper documentation. So find those loopholes, find those gaps in popular organizations. And then if you are from JavaScript, because my major tech stack is JavaScript, so you can look for the popular npm module. Go there and you'll definitely find some sort of loophole, whether it can be writing unit test or improving the docs, or maybe writing actions to automate some workflow. You can start a discussion with the maintainer, sharing your ideas that you want to write a GitHub action which can do so and so forth, and then you should be good to go.
Makes a lot of sense. And Santosh, if you want to add some point.
I mean, so I think the main reason why Hacktoberfest was started to actually get you started with open source, right? So remember that in case you are already an experienced developer and you are doing for just t-shirts, actually, then you don't understand the open source, right? Then you are just doing it for a t-shirt, and which doesn't make sense. So in case you're already experienced developer, don't reduce the just don't fall at the another level. Just keep the bar high, right? In case you already know open source, I mean, just try to actually raise a pull request which makes some sense, right? Which adds some value. Just don't go for some repositories which just gives you opportunity to earn t-shirts.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we are already over time, but if would also just want to share your socials, we can share that. But definitely do follow Harish, Oleg, Vinit, Santosh, and Ankit, because they're doing amazing things in their respective domains. And we try to bring on a lot of people from varied experiences, from JavaScript, Rust, blockchain, CI/CD, Jenkins, to sort of give a wide variety of perspective, in the different kind of domains that they're sort of contributing to. But I do see I think a few other questions on whether should we start with C++ in DSA. So I mean, you can really just start off with any particular language that you're comfortable with, because you can really solve a lot of questions, and probably, and I guess everyone would sort of agree with that fact. And I guess some of the other questions were regarding can open source help you in landing jobs? And I think everyone would agree that it is a really great way, because a lot of companies are today accepting. But so any like really quick point by anyone, like if you have experienced that yourself, like one liner, if everyone can probably just share their experiences in this particular question, because a lot of people, especially working professionals, also might be interested to know about this.
I mean, I just want to add my experience. So, sorry, you want to go ahead, Ankit? So, please.
All right, thank you. So like I'll keep it short. So like just for my Polygon interview, basically my team lead asked me to talk about my projects, right? And literally all of my projects were open source. So I just had like a good 5-10 minutes chatting about him with it, showing like walking through the code base with him, showing him how it works. So in my real life experience, or in this case you can call it anecdotal evidence, right? It really helped me a lot. Now the point is, a lot of companies will probably not want that. Maybe they only care about DSA. But what I feel is that if you're doing open source, you're actually strengthening your software development skills, and you're also learning to kind of adapt to how other code bases works, both of which are super important skills whenever you're trying to land jobs. And what I would suggest, again, this is a radical opinion, but if you are targeting jobs that do not require DSA, or basically jobs that won't whiteboard you, then yes, I would say that working on open source and basically having projects to show off is a must. And if you're like me and you don't want whiteboarding interviews, don't do them. Santosh, I think you can take over.
Yeah, I mean, so I got involved in open source after 11 years. So I started my career back in 2008, and I remember, I know the kind of pain I had to go every time I was looking for a new job. Open source actually made it easier for me, because now the table have turned. I mean, I have seen people who wants to work with me rather than actually I'm applying for a job is actually coming to me. So that's the change actually open source has made in my life. Of course, you can do that as well.
I think +1 to Santosh's point. So even I guess a lot of company reached out to me offering a job. just by looking at the GitHub profile and all. So I think once you start doing, I mean, that's like a portfolio for you. I mean, GitHub is the best place to build your digital footprint as a developer. Right? So you put your work there, and it's like authenticity of your work. Like in your resume, you can write anything and that I have built something and what's the proof. But if you put it on GitHub, anyone can actually find that the green dots there and your contributions there, your engagement there tells a lot about what kind of person you are in terms of tech skills. So that's I mean that's the one of the I think anyone who is doing open source, one thing to be sure about is that he is a very collaborative person, right? And I think every organization is looking for someone who can collaborate with them.
It's also worth mentioning that open source can also become a career because, yeah, as a developer, you can contribute open source, but there are so many positions solely focused on open source, not just software engineers. There are many developer advocate, community manager roles, there's program managers, product managers, etc., etc. And actually, by contributing to open source, by working with communities, you get not only not only hard skills, but soft skills for these kinds of high-level roles. And in the future, it will help you a lot because yeah, there is like when you talk about a maintainer, it means that maintainer is also project manager, product manager, scrum master, etc., for this his small project. And actually, it's a quite good experience basis if you want to switch to management, not necessarily people management, but also technical management positions in your company, in your next companies.
Yeah, from my side, even my current job is completely open source. So I remember I participated with Ankit in MLS Fellowship, and the projects that I developed there, it really fetched me almost 3 internships plus 1 full-time job. So open source is really great, and it basically shows a proof of concept that you actually have the projects and you actually have the skill set to contribute and learn. So from a fresher's perspective, I will be graduating next year. So most of the companies are not really looking for that great development skills. They're looking for some core CSS skills and all of that. So we are just putting a cherry on the cake through open source. So just be as it is.
Yeah, I mean, really valid points, and definitely, as Vinit and everyone mentioned, it's a digital footprint for you. While you are sort of contributing, and it's like a digital footprint for you through which people can actually look at the kind of projects and contributions that you're making. But yeah, I think with that, we have already gone over 12 minutes of the time that is the maximum time that is allocated. But it is really lovely to hear from everyone. Feel free to follow Harsh, Oleg, Vinit, Santosh, and Ankit. We can probably also you can share your credentials on Twitter or whichever platform, and people can follow you over there. But thank you so much to each and everyone who joined today for your amazing questions, and to all the panelists who joined us for this discussion related to open source. So we covered a lot of different points from starting your journey as a new contributor to what are some of the things that you should maintain. And if anyone of you wants to share some last thoughts before we finish this session, feel free to do so. But of course, even at Scalar, there are a lot of different open source initiatives that are happening, especially for the Scalar community, for contributors. Because again, open source, the main aspect of open source is that it has to be free for everyone, right? Of course, free in terms of not just like a free software, but the freedom to really contribute irrespective of what kind of place you're from or your gender or whatever, right? It is really truly there for everyone, and the kind of voice that everyone gets, like you can get voice in order to contribute, share your opinions. That really what makes it an all-inclusive platform to really, and that is what makes it really great. So yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to share any particular points, feel free to do so.
So I think Oleg will also know this because he's on the org admin mailing list for GSoC. But basically, something very amazing happened, I think 1 month ago, when basically everyone is evacuating from Afghanistan. And like, this is what I feel that the power of open source really is, right? So basically, the open source community entirely came together and helped open source, like people working with open source, actively get out of Afghanistan. And we raised, like, I don't know how many euros, but it was a ton. And like even I donated a bit. And although like my part to play in it was very, very little, I'm glad that I did it. And I feel that is truly the power of open source, right? Where even something as small as writing a commit can essentially result in big things in real life. And so if you are someone who believes that open source can do something for you, or you believe that information itself should always be free and out in the open source is for you. That's what I think.
Absolutely. And feel free to also give a follow to all our amazing folks from the community who have joined us for the panel discussion. Anyone else would want to share some last thoughts?
Just everyone enjoy Hacktoberfest, and looking forward to seeing you in the community,
Absolutely.
whatever community you choose.
Yep. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Harsh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, last point. So right now we are kind of having a race in the open source itself. So there has been a lot of uproar that has been created in the YouTube community and the online social media and all of that. So I see that a lot of people who are essentially beginners, they are just having a fear of missing out in the open source. So I see some of them who have just started up with the basic programming itself, reaching out and saying, I want to start with open source. So don't let the whole open source race give you the fear of missing out on the whole thing. Open source is a constant process. Hacktoberfest will come every year. Google Summer of Code will come every year. Just embrace the learning process. Use it as a learning opportunity to make the best out of your career. So remember, the community members will still be with you. They will still be supporting you out throughout the entire process. So just make sure that you're contributing to open source once you have the confidence that you can actually create an impact in the community.
Absolutely. Such a really valid point regarding don't consider to be a race just for the sake of it. Like others are doing it, we get this imposter syndrome and this fear of missing out syndrome. So try to first, work on yourself as on your skills and being able to work on some personal projects that you can look at and then go ahead. Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. Santosh and Vinit, anything from your end?
I mean, just want to add, as already Harsh mentioned, so don't make it a race. I mean, I've seen a lot of new people actually starting new communities. There are, I believe me, there are a lot of existing communities where you can get involved and grow up rather than actually starting something new from scratch and rather than making it as competition.
And we need finally, if you want to also say something. I think you're speaking on mute.
Open source like is it better now?
Yeah, yeah.
Am I audible? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think I want to just say one thing that in open source, like never compare your first chapter with someone's last chapter. Right? If you check out Santosh's profile now, you'll be overwhelmed that he's doing so great. But you should not start comparing at that level. You should look for the Santosh's first contributions, right? Go and check out like the year he started contributing on GitHub. So I think those green dots shows your journey, and that should be that is a path. I mean, from where you are starting, and I literally get amazed by the people, right? Their first contribution is so great. I mean, the first thing which I put on GitHub was a calculator, and now people are putting full-fledged Mon project on GitHub as their first contribution. So we are learning from you guys. So your first chapter is definitely better than at least mine. So that I can surely tell about that. So maybe like just follow your own path there. This is your profile. This is your green dots. Like how you are progressing is you only can define. You only can. So I think that. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Harsh, Oleg, Vinit, Santosh, and Ankit. And I hope that everyone enjoyed the live session. With that, we'll conclude. And thank you so much to the audience, who joined us. And yeah, make sure to keep contributing, keep learning, and yeah, I mean that's the way that life also goes on. I mean, apart from just open source. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.